What's up, everybody? Welcome to TeslaFix. Today we are talking about, of course, about the elephant in the room, which is, again, the Cybertruck, because in the earnings call, we've heard something like a pretty bad news. Is it a bad news? We will see, but the Cybertruck production ramp is pretty slow, like Elon said, and especially also the margins of the Cybertruck will be totally different. That's what we look into, and of course, we're going to do a little outlook what is happening with all the factories around the globe. And of course, again, when I talk about factories, there is only one guy we have to put on always, and we will see who it is after the intro.
Welcome to TeslaFix. Make sure to subscribe and like this episode.
Brian is back again. So Brian, thank you very much for joining me again. I'm super stoked to have you on. So maybe you can tell the audience what you thought about the earnings and were you surprised? And then we can jump into the episode, go into the Cybertruck deep dive. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'm just glad to hear that the elephant in the room isn't me this time. So that's
or me.
a nice, it's a helpful little plus. The earnings. So I was getting pushed by the prognosticators. Brian, what's your earnings per share estimate? What is it? What is it? Just give me a number. And I would say, I just didn't follow closely enough. I could go in and pick my favorite prognosticator and come in within a penny up or down and be like, oh, look how good I did. And I would have been pretty close. But that would have been dishonest. And so I wasn't going to do that. If you're going to actually follow the numbers, you have to actually follow them. So that's why when it comes to factories, you talk to me, is because I don't just freeball it when it comes to the factories. I actually know what I'm talking about. So I stay in my lane. So when the earnings came in at 66 cents, I was surprised. I would have not guessed that. So good thing I didn't try and ballpark it, because it wouldn't have come out well. But everything else in that call was good news to me. Everything in that report was good news to me. A lot of things that we were told we shouldn't count on anymore were still there. The idea that there's still $500 million a quarter in ZEV credits is magical. This is free money. This is other companies paying Tesla to build factories, to build more machines that build the machines. And it's huge. You can't overlook it. And there's, that's not real money. It turns out it is. They're real dollars that you can really spend. And why did because we heard those were going away. Why didn't they go away? Because when the legacy car companies came back strong after shutdown, they didn't come back strong in EVs. They came back strong in internal combustion. They need more credits. And who's got the most to sell appears to be Tesla.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the audience, maybe you can explain what ZEV credits are, because
Sure. So the idea is governments around the world set up these programs saying, look, you need to get better gas mileage. You need to get to at least, 30 miles an hour, 50, whatever it is, some number. And if you don't hit that number, you need to pay some massive fine or buy credits from somebody who's overproduced clean, high energy, high efficiency vehicles. So when you look at that, the idea, so a good example is Fiat Chrysler. For a long time, they were giving Tesla, back when it was still Fiat, before it was Stellantis, when it was Fiat Chrysler, they were giving them like $100 million a quarter to offset their low efficiency dyno burners. And so what would happen, and you'd get these cynical people saying, well, if those weren't there, they wouldn't have, any profit at all.
Any profits, yeah.
Any. And for a time that was true. But the flip side was also true. If Chrysler was forced to pay the fines instead, they probably wouldn't have had any profit. So both companies got to show a profit. And instead of building their own, and these credits are available to anyone. If you and I would like to build a car company that makes electric cars, we can sell our EV credits to other companies who have chosen to continue polluting and clouding up our skies.
Absolutely. So interesting stuff here for everybody who didn't know that. Of course, this is totally relevant still for Tesla, but we could, or didn't have those credits, Tesla would still stand in a pretty strong position still, and
Yes.
they are not reliable on those things. No, they don't rely on those things. I mean, and still they are doing a pretty great job, and this is just a cherry on top for them to have in the bank, and that's pretty good. So yeah,
it's the
crazy
icing
how
on
high
the
number
cake.
was.
It's the icing on the cake, but Tesla still has the cake. That's the important part.
Yeah.
Another thing we saw that was important in the earnings report was that the mega packs are still rolling out in increasing numbers, and despite huge price cuts, they're at 25% margin. And while people were complaining that 66 cents per share was not good earnings, sorry about that again. While 66 cents per share were not good earnings, they still had a 17.9% margin on their automotive side, which is
crazy,
very high. It's not quite industry leading, but it's right at the top.
So this margin, is this margin factored in already from the price cuts that we've seen, or how do you see that? Do you think this will just show up in the next quarter, or
so the price cuts happened early in the quarter. So I'd say most of them have already been realized. But the other thing we saw on that was that the cost of goods sold went down by more than the margin was more than the price was reduced. So that means, and we don't know when those prices had fallen or how much they may continue to fall. They're always working on additional efficiencies. We know partway through the quarter, Texas was shut down for 3 weeks to improve efficiency. That's going to result in a lower cost to build. We know the Highland is a cheaper car to build than the original Model 3. And then in Q1, we expect to see the Model 3 Highland coming out of Fremont. That'll reduce costs again. So everywhere you look, I would not be surprised to see additional price cuts coming on some models in some markets over the coming 2 quarters.
Mm-hmm. I also
while
agree
maintaining good margins.
Yeah, totally. I also see that. I can imagine that Tesla, with their cost of goods lowering right now, or being lower, that this will be, again, such a competitive advantage when you look forward to when they ramp up their production. Of course, they need to do that to get to those high numbers that Elon announced. Like at 2030, he wants to have 20 or 10 million, he said, but also 20 could be possible. So again, a lot of here, the Elon factor, you have to maybe calculate that out, but I assume 10 million could be possible. Do you also think that we are still on track to reaching 10 million? Or
10 for sure. 10 for sure. The compact, if you build a factory making the compact car and it cranks out less than 2 million when fully ramped, I'd be very surprised. And to think that a compact factory or 2 or 3 won't be ramped by 2030 is losing sight of everything. I think that would be very, very unlikely.
Interesting. I mean, if you look at what Tesla is doing, the factories were retooled. Many factories had some delays or timings or standstills. If you look at the Cybertruck now, if you compare it, they are kind of not really on track. They must have had huge difficulties getting this thing out. You could really hear it in the earnings call. Do you see that as pretty mission critical or something? Is it as dangerous as I try to paint it in this picture or in this thumbnail, especially you've clicked on? So
I would say no. Now, Elon had some comments on the call that I think were overinterpreted. Some people, when he said, if this fails, we dug our own grave. And people took that to mean, oh, he did dig his own grave. This was a mistake. Nope, that's not what I heard him say. And I also heard him say, well, the ramp is going to be difficult because getting this all, it's costly and challenging. And people said, oh, I thought it was supposed to be simple. The finished product is supposed to be simple. building the assembly line is not necessary. No one said building the line was going to be simple. They said that once it's running, it'll be simple. And that's what you want in, look at the efficiency of trains. But building train tracks is a lot of work. You do it anyway because it's worth it in the long run. That's how I took that.
Okay. So Tesla is not in danger with the Cybertruck, but we still had some numbers that it's getting kind of delayed the production ramp. They estimate to be fully ramped in 2025, where they can reach 250,000 Cybertrucks per year. That's what I have in mind. The costs of the Cybertruck will reach the point that the Cybertruck is profitable, not this year, not next year, but maybe in 2025 again. So how do you view this information we've got?
Okay, so those are the three big ones. I was on the stream live when it happened, when Elon said 2025, and an analyst said 3 years, and he said, no, that's not how calendars work. Think more like 18 months. 18 months to get a product to full ramp is pretty good. Shanghai was able to get the Model 3 up in 12 months and the Model Y up in 12 months. But those were both just about miracles when they did them. And those were on well-known, well-understood vehicles using well-established and tested production methods in Fremont. So to get it to 18 months on a thing that's never existed before is pretty good, I think. So that's the first part. The 250,000 units at fully ramped, I saw people saying, oh, what a flop. What a terrible, that would make it one of the worst selling trucks. Really? 250,000 is a lot of units. That would actually put it at fourth best, assuming that the three ahead of it don't lose any sales, which they very well could. So, and that's 18 months from now, we're talking about the fourth best selling truck in the biggest truck market in the world. That's pretty good. If Model 3 had gotten to number 4 among sedans in 18 months, we'd be doing a little happy dance. So I don't see that as a bad number. And and then the second part to that was people were saying, well, weren't they supposed to be making millions? That's unobjective. That is one objective. But the line that they're putting in has a capacity of 250. They would just put in another line or 2 or 3. But to remember, the best-selling truck is the F Series, not the F-150. It's all the Fs, the 150, 253, all of them, the Super Duty, all of it. So, and those are made in like 5 or 6 different factories. They're made in a lot of places. So they're lumping a lot of cars under one umbrella by doing that. That'd be like if the 3 and Y were just considered one car. So, because you're talking some very different trucks that are all called F-Series. But even when you combine them all together, they top out around $1 million a year. So if this is going to be at a quarter of that on its second full year of production, that's pretty good.
Absolutely. Now, when you explain it, it makes totally sense. And I hope that some viewers also think differently now a little bit about this topic, because at first I was a little bit disappointed, of course, with my monkey brain, I would say, that I was like, there are 1.5 million pre-orders. Those poor people that ordered them, when will they get their Cybertruck? It will take years until they get it. So, but maybe that's
possible. That's possible. It could take years for them to get it. There are people who ordered 100. Unless people are paying, $10,000, $20,000 markups to get them early, a lot of those will fall apart. I know people who are banking on robotaxi being available by the time they take delivery, and it still could. But if it's not, I don't see them executing 100 orders. I see them taking back 99 deposits and using it to buy a truck. But the other question you'd asked was about profit prior to 2025.
Yes.
This is Tesla never sells cars for less than it costs to build them. I took that to mean that the that they won't reach profit on it until 2025, meaning that the line will not be paid for. That all the R&D and the equipment and whatnot, that it will not become a big money generator on the books. Of course, everyone they sell will be at a positive margin. And we know that because with demand as high as it is, even if the truck has to cost $100,000, that's what they'll sell it for, because they don't lose money on a per unit basis. They never have. And it's frustrated a lot of early reservation holders across every model. You remember the $35,000 Model 3 didn't come out until 2 years after the $60,000 Model 3. And it's because they had to make their money back. So every unit they move inches them closer to profitability. And if, when it comes out, the price is good and the specs are good and the reviews are good, they may quickly add additional lines. With the Model Y, when they started building Giga Texas, the plan was that it was going to be the Cybertruck factory, but they could see there were delays coming with the 4680s, and the demand for the Y caught them off guard. I know he said he thought it would be the best-selling car in the world, but that certainly didn't feel like a credible claim at the time. And so they instead put in more Model Y lines. It's very unusual to make a Model Y or any car in 4 different factories, let alone 2 in the same country. That's pretty unusual. But the demand is there. So if they get into it and see that they've got endless demand, like they hope for the Cybertruck, it would not surprise me to see them put in a second, a third, a fourth line to meet that demand if the price per unit still works.
That's a big deal. To remind people that Tesla actually has never before sold their cars with a loss. Interesting angle you've said, because I was a little bit confused by that. So that's good that you've clarified that. But yeah, it's interesting. Have you seen something or heard something from the earnings call that you would say this is a huge red flag for you? I mean, you've also already mentioned that, of course, yeah, you see the earnings call as a total success. But is there something that you would say, okay, that was a little bit like bumpy, or you didn't expect that? Does something come into mind, or was everything flawless?
So the report, I didn't see any red flags, and I like to dig for red flags. The earnings call was rocky. It wasn't great, but those are always a mixed bag. The new CFO is not as soft and smoothly spoken as the old one, and I'm sure he was a bit nervous at being his first call. And he, by the way, has been confirmed. He is no longer the interim CFO, but the actual CFO. I think the board of directors had to vote to confirm him. And yeah, the call itself, I know Elon had said, a year or two ago, that he would no longer be on earnings calls unless there was some critical reason. And I'm looking at it saying, step back from that role. You've got a great team there who can field all those questions. There were some usual terrible questions and some usual good questions. And yeah, I didn't see any real cause for concern. I think it was I did get a chuckle when they said, here's what, Cybertruck, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. Can you tell me about the Highland? We don't talk about products. You've been talking about products for 20 minutes. What are you talking about? You don't talk about products. Yeah,
oh,
I'll tell you about all my friends and neighbors, but don't ask about my secretary, Catherine. That's too, how dare you?
How dare you? Suspicious. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Oh man, yeah, that's a good sign. So you've heard it here first, guys. Maybe you have something you want to add. Maybe you can write it down in the comments below. So write something that you didn't like about the earnings call, and if you liked something, write that as well. And also, if you want to greet somebody, write that as well. Of course, the more comments, the better.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, actually, I would ask in the comments what I'd like to see, because I do come in and read these comments. To you, what was the highlight of the report? What was the one thing that made you the most excited? Because, I think everybody found something different. One thing I thought was interesting was the answer to why, if FSD is getting so good, why drop the price from $15,000 to $12,000? And the answer is pretty obvious. Take rates must be down. And it's not, I won't say that FSD isn't worth $15,000, but I will say it's not worth it to everyone. Well, a private chauffeur is $50,000 a year. Surely it's worth that. It isn't, because I would never hire a chauffeur. That's the whole reason I have a car in the first place, is because I can't afford a driver. Now, to a fleet, that might be a good deal. To a delivery service, that's a great deal. But to individuals, it's too much. Now, for viewers who watch your channel but not mine, you should know I have finally placed an order for a Model Y. And of course, my viewers asked, are you getting FSD? And I said, yes, for 90 days, because that's what's included in the referral. And it's not that I don't value FSD. It's not that the problem is that $12,000 is money I don't have. That's too much. There are no state incentives where I live. And I will not be eligible for the federal incentive either. So it is a budget buster as it is. And another $12,000, I just cannot do it. Now, if they dropped it to $6,000, I might be able to find the money. But in the meantime, I'll take my free 90 days, see how it goes, and then subscribe as needed after that for my $200 a month.
Yeah, that's a pretty reasonable idea. So, Brian, congratulations on placing your order. Finally, we've talked about that, of course, in the DMs. Pretty cool that you did that. But talking about Model Y, this is a perfect segue to a question that's going through my head still. The 4680 Model Y now is off the menu, you could say. So why is that? Maybe for the viewers, something interesting, of course, for the Cybertruck, but maybe you can say something about this.
Sure. So the 4680 was originally, we believed, going to be the everything battery. I thought it was going to go in the Model S and X, and then they came back with the 18650s again from Japan. It was a little strange. Then we thought it was going to go into the Semi, and it didn't. They stayed with the 2170s for that, the ones made in Nevada. I thought that was very strange. And then when Texas was coming online, we saw them putting in the battery lines to make 4680s. We saw actual 4680s that were leaked in the wild, that were actually taken to labs and torn apart. And then the question became, are they going to make the Cybertruck exclusively with 4680s, or are they going to do it like the Model Y? Because for a while there in Texas, they were making Model Ys, some with 4680s and some with 2170s. So some had the 4680 structural battery pack and some did not. Some were just like the ones everywhere else. And we thought that was very strange, because you could see from drone flights, if you saw a body in white, you could just look, does it have a floor or not? Because if it doesn't have a floor, that one's going to have a structural battery pack. And if it has a floor, it's the old one. So we thought that was very strange. So the fact that they have taken the 4680 version of the Model Y off the menu in Texas suggests that they need all those cells to make them Cybertrucks. Now, on the call, there was something where they were saying that one of the battery lines would be dedicated just to the Model Y batteries, but I don't see how that makes sense. A cell is a cell. They all come out the same. But the other big news there is that the battery production, they just hit their 20 millionth cell made in Texas. It was just a few months ago we saw that they'd hit 10 million, and it appears that they're still speeding up. And then on the call we heard that they have 4 lines, but only one of them is running at full speed, meaning they should be able to take the lessons learned from that line, move them over to the other 3 lines, and that they would be able to quadruple output of 4680s, which means they would be capable of handling as many Cybertrucks as they would reasonably expect to make in the coming year and a half while they ramp.
Do you think the Model Y was a test? That's something I would argue. Maybe it was a test to see how they could implement it, because they had their kind of like their good run rate of producing those battery cells, but the Cybertruck wasn't ready. So they tried just, put it into the Model Y then with the structural battery pack. Maybe it was. How do you see this? Do you think?
I think that's a very good theory, and I hadn't heard that. That maybe they knew they would not have enough and need to go back to just a 2170 version. But sure, we can build a cell and test it in the lab, but we need to get it in a car. And better than getting it in a car, why don't we get it in hundreds, nay, thousands of cars that are good enough that we can first sell them to employees and then sell them publicly and then monitor them, which you can do remotely through all the software and make sure that they are surviving as expected. And the number's low enough that if it's not, we'll just recall them and give them new cars or new batteries. It actually have to be new cars because they're structural. So it would be, you couldn't just put in a 2170. The car wouldn't have the structure. But yeah, that's a great theory. And the timing would have been sufficient because they started a good year ago. So they would have had enough real world data to confirm that, yes, the structural 4680 pack performs as expected. Because the last thing you want to do is get, your first 100,000 trucks all recalled. That is not a good look. Other manufacturers get away with that stuff all the time. But with Tesla, as you know, the littlest thing is the end of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, but it makes sense also because when you look at the timeline, the Cybertruck should have been released way earlier. They had problems with the manufacturing strategy they did. First, they wanted to do an exoskeleton. That fell kind of through. This thing is still very tough and pretty near exoskeleton, but not really. So it's we're not there yet. Maybe with the new model coming from the line, because Elon Musk's plan, of course, is to have this matchbox factory where you can just cast a car with every part more or less out of one piece. But of course, this won't come into fruition. But yeah, it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, my thought on the delay, because I was having a discussion on X this morning about that. A gentleman said, this truck should have been out 2 years ago. And I said, no, because they had to build the factory first. And the factory wasn't done until last year. The earliest the truck could have come out was 1 year ago, because that's when the factory should have been done. They did change gears and start making Ys first and put this off. The second delay was that, as we discussed, batteries were a shortage. But if they really needed to, they could have, I'm sure, come up with a 2170 version that would have worked reasonably well. But the third one is they needed that second 9,000-ton casting machine. I had asked Sandy Monroe, is it possible? So I said, I'm just trying to find a way. This was a year ago. I said, I'm trying to find a way that they could actually make this sooner than we think. We know at the time they had one 9,000-ton press and that they needed a second one. I said, could they do like they did with the Model Y, where they took the initial ones, had a dual casting in the back that was just kind of fused together. And he said, nope, I don't believe they could do that. I think based on the weight loads that you would expect for a truck, it would be problematic. You wouldn't want to do that. I said, could they, because the front end has a smaller casting, could they get away with smaller than a 9,000-ton press? And because I was asking the right person, he said, no, it would need to be, and he gave me a specific number, like 8,200 or 8,400 ton. They could get away with smaller, but not with a 6,000 ton. You couldn't use one of the ones that was making castings for the Model Y to make the front casting for the Cybertruck. So until you've got, if the stainless steel was not the issue, it was explained to me by people who do sheet metal work all day, that they could design a line to run that in a month. The problem was they didn't have the casting machine, they didn't have the batteries, and prior to a year ago, they didn't have the building in which to build it. And Oh, and the exoskeleton itself, like you said, it looks like when they got into early testing that it didn't have enough structure, which makes sense. If you've got just narrow beams that are doing the top of the triangle, I can see why that would be insufficient to hold the whole thing together. And so they are doing a hybrid exoskeleton, endoskeleton kind of design. I pressed Corey when he was still, Corey Steuben, who was at Monroe & Associates. When I was out there a few months ago, I pressed him because a lot of people were still debating, is it an exoskeleton or not? And he said there's a Venn diagram of the two things, and there's an overlap, and it is in that overlap. Because even though the exoskeleton is providing a substantial amount of support, the question is, if you got rid of that stamped interior, would it still have its structural integrity? He said you could drive it down the road, but I don't think you could put a load in it. So no, it's a hybrid. And it's clear that was not something they were intending to have to do.
Do you think that, because you touched on an interesting point here that gives me an idea of a question that is pretty important, I think. Tesla and Elon Musk, of course, talking always about their plans when they announce something as well. So they're talking about, we're going to do this thing, it's going to be this, and that, and just go through the list. And afterwards, when they try to make the production happening and plan for mass production and have their prototypes on the line, and ideas change all the time, and suddenly the Model Y needs to ramp up again, for example, and then they have to shift their focus on that again. Because for me, at least, I see that different car companies kind of announce something and then they stick to it, like if the world depends on that. But still, for example, they produce a small amount of cars, then release to the public, so the press release is fine. So in the press, it looks better, but actually the production is worse. So how do you see this this dynamic? Is that good or bad? For me, at least, I think it's a good idea to focus on the product and announce the plans, but maybe Elon should disclose that more. He's hyping it up a little bit, I think. But how do you see this?
So on this call, you'll notice there was no hype. There was no biggest ever, best ever, cheapest ever. There was none of that. But if you look at the other guys, what you're finding is some of their big grand ambitions keep falling apart. Chevy Silverado in its electric version was supposed to come out next year. That's been delayed by a whole year. The Ford Lightning plant has laid off hundreds of workers. He said, well, no, it's a shift realignment. We're just realigning the shifts. Yeah, because you've got 8,000 trucks sitting on dealer lots that you can't move. In the same discussion I was having on X, or was it X? I don't know, somewhere, somebody was saying, well, if they'd have just stuck with a more traditional design, they could have that out by now. And I said, right, but a traditional design wouldn't have worked. And we know that because the legacy guys used a traditional design. They used 100 years of slavish adherence to, do I have a spider behind me? Look at that.
Yeah, it works. Yeah. That's the Easter egg for this episode.
It's moving. It's moving. He's walking.
Wow, that's more interesting than our discussion, Brian.
That's fantastic. I apologize, but it just caught me off guard.
No worries.
What was I even saying? The legacy design is what's bogging them down. It's what's holding them back. It has made them produce vehicles that are too heavy, too expensive, with batteries that are prohibitively large. You can build 3 Model Ys for the price for the battery of a Hummer or an upcoming Silverado. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a good 25 centimeters thick. That takes up an unconscionable amount of floor space.
Yeah, it's so big that you can kind of the where you sit is even higher than in another truck. It's crazy. Yeah, it's double stacked. It's so the weight is
the design
higher.
The whole thing. But really, you could forgive all that if it wasn't so expensive.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of atoms. That's a lot of mass. That's a lot of minerals. It's a problem.
Yeah. The same strategy also did Mercedes, that they could say, we have more range than the Tesla Model S. And the weight is much higher, pretty close to being so heavy that you have to have a different driver's license category. So pretty close from the efficiency standpoint. Tesla just produces inside of this sweet spot. They don't move away from that. They could move away from that, but still, I think they're going to come up maybe when the battery tech is getting a little bit smaller, or the efficiency, or the 4680s, for example, the structure pack, when they figured new efficiencies out. We've seen that with software updates. They might just shift again, and then suddenly we have higher range with an update or something like this. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
There was a terrible argument I saw. There was an article where this author said, who's going to pay for the roads and bridges from these EVs that weigh 50% more than gas cars? To which I responded saying, if you look at the curb weight of a Model 3 versus a BMW 3 Series, they are the same. They're like within 50 pounds. If you look at a Model Y versus an X3 or an X5, they're the same weight. And some, of course, clown has to respond. And I don't know if he's a graduate of Ringling Brothers or Barnum and Bailey, but one of those clown colleges, should probably see if he could get his degree money back, said, right, but the Hummer weighs 8,000 pounds. I said, right, but there's no gasoline equivalent of that beast, of that monster. And if you look at the sales, there's also no electric version of it even itself, because they don't sell any, because it is not good. I was at the Detroit Auto Show and I did a test ride in the Hummer and in the Cadillac Lyriq. And in both cases, my takeaway before I got to experience them and after was, who is this for? Who is this for? This is a car without a market. And so, of course, my thumbnail had a picture of both of them and it just said turds. And I got some pushback in the comments where people said, well, you're just a Tesla fanboy. You just love everything Tesla and hate everything else. You've seen enough of my channel. That's not true. I recognize the value in other manufacturers, but those are cars without a market. They don't make sense. I was more impressed by the Hummer, but I can't imagine who would buy that thing. And for what purpose? You're not going to take it off-road. It's not especially capable unless all you're doing is very slowly climbing over very predictably sized rocks.
Yeah, we've seen the footage of the Cybertruck doing their tests in the field. It looked pretty good. They also have this bigger suspension and the smaller floor size because of the 4680 batteries, not like the stacked floor of the Hummer. So I also think off-roading makes much more sense because the point of gravity where it is, the height of the gravity point.
Sure, the center of gravity, and also the stainless steel is going to be more durable against branches and scratches and nicks and whatnot. It's going to just fit a lot more use cases. And again, no car can be right for everyone all the time. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be right for enough people to make sense to move it at the volumes you need. I do want to talk about what we heard in the call about the compact car, because
please.
Yeah, that confirmed some theories that we'd all been speculating. He said it's going to be very utilitarian. It's going to be a very functional vehicle. And that right there tells you, while you and I may like the styling, it's not going to have a traditional styling that make people say, wow, which means it's going to be cheaper to build. Cheaper to build is the whole key. Cheaper, quicker, makes it so that they can actually sell a $25,000 car with a positive margin and get them out the door as quick as possible. And again, when you're talking something that's simple can lead to weight reductions. And that's the big key. You get into this virtue cycle where you've now got a lighter design, a lighter car. Light means a smaller battery. You just saved a bunch of money. Now you've got cheaper wheels, cheaper suspension, cheaper brakes. And I'm just waiting for the day when Elon decides the best brakes are no brakes, because if I can get you up to 60 miles an hour as quick as the tires can hold on, I can get you back down to 0. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but would it surprise you? I don't know, man.
I don't know. Yeah, I think in Germany this wouldn't happen because the legislation, of course, is still in the old century. So,
yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to say you need to have brakes. But at the same time, if it goes to brake by wire, an electrical failure means you have no brakes. And because with hydraulic brakes, if the hydraulic unit fails, you can still stop. It's just you have to press a lot harder. But with a brake by wire system, I don't know if that's the case.
Absolutely.
And the only drive-by-wire I've seen, I want to say, is the Lexus with the yoke that had variable steering. And if drive-by-wire comes too, at that point, just give me a joystick, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you think that, or I had to laugh when you started talking about the compact car, because I've imagined that, because you said the design might not be expected from Tesla in that sense. Maybe it looks a little bit not so shiny and great that people expect. And then I thought about the Russian brand Lada. Is it Tesla's Lada? Maybe.
More of a Trabi, but yeah.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. But the compact car, getting into this topic is pretty interesting. We've heard that there are some troubles with Mexico. What is that about? I would love to hear something about this, because I haven't looked into that so thoroughly like you did. I know you you've really
followed it very closely. Yeah, so they said we plan to break ground in 3 months, and then they didn't. And then the Walter Isaacson book comes out and confuses everyone, and it turned a lot of real casual observers into instant experts because they read a book.
Absolutely.
Or more accurately, they probably read a report from someone who read an excerpt of the book. There is no indication I have seen that production is moving to Texas. Well, yes, but there's space there. There's space everywhere. Well, but there's buildings there. They're not purpose-built. They would have to be purpose-built. But what we heard on the call that was new was we are finalizing the design. Okay, so the problem isn't permits, it isn't bureaucracy, it's that you haven't submitted for the permit yet. You can't get a permit until you submit a design, and if the design isn't finished, you can't submit it. So that's still happening. And again, the big thing, and I don't remember if we talked about this last time, with Mexico is they have more free trade agreements. They have free trade agreements with 50 countries, where the U.S. only has 20. They're not going to move that production to Texas if they can't then ship the cars duty-free to the Trans-Pacific Partnership members, or to the, I don't remember the name of the treaty right now, but there's also one with Latin American countries. These are the target market. This is where $25,000 cars are meant to be sold, is in the developing world, where $35,000 is still a deal breaker. So that's a big chunk of affordability. And imagine if you're in one of those developing countries, the price is $25,000. Maybe there's an EV incentive on top of it. Maybe they waive the sales tax or registration, or there are a lot of ways to make incentives that make an EV cheaper with or without actually using real dollars.
Absolutely. And I have to add something here, that in Europe, we also expect a $25,000 car as soon as possible. We want to have that, of course, because our market is made for smaller cars as well. We also have in Germany, I've talked about this many times on my channel, and it infuriates all the German viewers, is that, we are a low-wage country. Of course, if you compare it again to Eastern Europe, it's different and everything. But we have such a high tax pressure that it's hard for people to actually buy a car that's more expensive than 40,000 euros, for example. On average, of course, there are people that earn more and there are people that earn less, but there are more people that earn less than people that earn more. So, of course, we also need a cheaper version. So the Model 3 Highland was pretty stoked for me because, for example, the M3 series or the 3 Series from BMW is a pretty popular vehicle here, or also the Golf is also a very popular vehicle category. So the $25,000 car is absolutely important for the European market. We also think about the Fiats, for example, the small ones from Italy, or also the Peugeots and Renaults from France. So smaller cars are a thing here. It's not like some Americans say that, the Cybertruck can't be released in Europe because your roads are too tiny. They imagine like a fairy tale land with with small roads and only for miniature cars, it seems. But of course, we have sprinter vans, we have big roads. It depends, of course, if you go to southern Italy or to the Provence somewhere, there might be smaller roads, but yeah, we have everything ready. So how do you see the $25,000 car for the European market? Is it also a deal breaker that we need this, or how do you view that?
Well, need is a tricky word. Need for what purpose? I think, I suspect that as soon as the proof of concept is in place in the first factory for the compact, that they will immediately replicate it in 2 other places, one in Asia and one at the north end of the existing site in Berlin, because they could make them in Asia and export them, but why? When they've got a factory right there. Labor is such a small part of the cost, and it's easily offset in a $25,000 car by not paying import taxes and not paying for shipping. It's reasonable. So the beauty is, any country could buy a compact, affordable car. But I think Europe would be an even bigger market than the US, because compact cars are better sellers in Europe than they are in the US. And I think that, some of the roads are smaller, but Europe is pretty modern, you guys. It's pretty modern. In the old parts of old towns, of course, you can get narrow roads. You can also find that in some parts of the US. There was a gentleman who watched the video about Aptera and said, well, because the front wheels are so wide, they're, a good 75 inches or so. That would be what, 70, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But he was saying, in my little part of wherever I live, there are 3 roads near here that I know it is too wide to pass. And I said, and I didn't respond, but my response would be, okay, 3 roads out of how many? You can go around, because those roads already have those. You're not telling me that there's an entire neighborhood that lorries can't go to, that you can't get delivery trucks down. That's not a thing. And I've been down some real skinny roads on giant tour buses that are 100 inches wide, which would be probably 270 centimeters or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've
real
calculated
wide.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
if you can fit a tour bus down that road, you can fit a pickup truck or an Aptera. It may not be comfortable, but you can do it.
Yeah. One last question for this episode was for me that do you think the production of the Cybertruck will have similarities to the production of the smaller car? Are there similarities, or is it totally different? Or is this a kind of new way of building stuff? So we're going to see more and more cyber products on the line. Maybe the van will be similar because we have this new vehicle category of utility cars. This could make sense, but do you think the production methods are also implemented? Do you see that?
I think every car Tesla makes is a step down a path, and that the Cybertruck is the next logical step from what we saw already. So we know how we got. So the first big changes were getting rid of buttons and knobs. The car's already a computer. You don't need buttons and knobs. They're decorative. Yep. The next step was, we've got, the first big step was putting the battery in the floor. No one had really done that before. And then you get to the Giga Berlin grand opening and we see, wait a minute, they're putting the seats on the battery before it goes into the car. That's new. That's something new. And it makes perfect sense. Totally. If you're putting the battery in as one piece, why wouldn't the mountings already? Of course. And every car is a step in that direction. I think we're going to see the 48-volt architecture on the compact, because it does reduce the amount of copper that goes into the vehicle. It makes the wiring cheaper. It makes the car lighter. And I think we're already going to see some unboxed light methods. So they're saying the compact will use a unboxed design where it's just modules, stick them together, out the door. I think we're going to see more of that with the Cybertruck, where it's going to have a bunch of pieces already put together before they go in to make the final assembly very quick and easy. And I think everything is just one more step, with the Cybertruck having no paint and no stamping much except for the interior cabin. I think they're going to try and do as much of that as possible, because stamping you'll never get the same stamping twice. That's why some cars have panel gaps and some don't. And the same with paint. Paint is irregular, inconsistent, expensive, time-consuming, and environmental difficulty. If they can get away from paint, they will. And if you start getting away from all those costs, all those time considerations, all those space considerations, all those expenses, it starts to become clear how you can get a cheaper car. And the biggest one I'd say is, if the Cybertruck being so weird and so different becomes a bestseller, it tells them, I think we can sell anything. I mean, I don't know if you've heard about this guy, Elon, but he can bottle burnt hair and sell it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you've heard it here first. The $25,000 car is actually the Cybertruck Mini, if you could say that. So
maybe
yeah, but it's interesting. I also think that they kind of will have a similar DNA of manufacturing. And do you see that they're gonna step back to the different lines, from the Model Y line to the Model 3 line to the Model S and X line? Do you see that they're gonna push something over there, or just keep those lines like they are, more or less, because they reach their targets without improving that? Or how do you see that?
I think S and X may not be long for this world. We've seen rumor of a Model 3 Plaid. And if that comes out, the Model S becomes less relevant, right? That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
If the S, and if they come out, then of course, obviously they'd have a Y Plaid. If those come out, the S and X become less relevant, and they're already not selling great. The 3, I think, is safe for now, because the Highland redesign makes it profitable and efficient and a good car. And then I think in the next year or two, we will see the Y refreshed into the Juniper, and it will be the same thing as the 3 refresh, the 3 fresh, and that will push sales even further. I don't think they have a need to refresh it yet. I think it's already profitable, cost efficient. It's selling in tremendous volume and shows no signs of letting up. And if they cut the cost another $2,000, that'll add another 10% demand on top. So it'll be, I think we've got quite a while until the cyber changes roll backwards into the other models. And I think they may just wait until it's a completely new model, even to go with the 48 volt, just so that there's no mix up with parts going into the wrong cars.
Yeah, it's reasonable what you've said. And I also think that, the future seems to be pretty bright in that sense, that Tesla is still improving their manufacturing. And maybe they have their marketing disasters with announcing stuff when they're planning to do it this way, but they're not scared of changing right when they are developing those products. And even if that gives them backlash, or Elon said, oh, it should be out this year, but it's 2 years from now, and what's happening? So maybe the timelines are like they are. We should get used to that, I think, because this is such a new vehicle category that they are still improving and improving. And if you look at the history of car production, we are at the beginning of electric cars, and Tesla already is like 25 years ahead of some of the manufacturers, I would say. A little bit steep there, but a little bit cheeky comment here. But I think it's interesting. And the last question for this show is, Brian, what do you see for the future? Do you think they're on track? Maybe you can give a little outlook, and then we can just
Well, let's talk about the 10 and 20 million, because that's the future. There's the future in energy. That's unstoppable. They'll build more megapack factories. There's the future in bots. That's too far over the horizon for me to see. There's the future of robotaxi and FSD more generally. When it happens, it happens. But I don't think anyone alive knows when that will be, because it, I think, remains unknowable. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be adding more GPU clusters to try and solve it. So in terms of automotive, what do I see? Are they going to become the biggest car maker in the world ever, let alone in the next 6.5 years? And the answer is maybe. Their low-end target is 10 million. Looking at my numbers, my low-end target is 10 million. My numbers used to be based almost exclusively on their ability to produce, but now they have more capacity than they have demand for the first time. They could, if they got a 20% uptick in Model Y orders in the US, they could fill them. If they got a 15 or 20% uptick in Europe, they could increase the output at Berlin and fill them. But they've got some things to work on before that happens. But the introduction of the Cybertruck, if that sells at a reasonable price, if it delivers as expected, the demand is going to be massive. That's going to be 1 million right there. The compact, even if they only make it in one design, which I still don't think they will, I still think each design center will be allowed to make their own version on the same platform. But even if they just made one design, there's no reason it couldn't be bigger than the Model Y, which is already probably the best-selling car in the world by volume and dollars. So
That's crazy.
Is the path to 10 million is right in front of us. We just need 2 or 3 more factories turning out more cars. That's it. That's not that big of an ask.
So pretty awesome what you've just said. I hope we're going to reach the 10 million number, and it's reasonable what you've said. So maybe for the audience, write something down in the comments if you agree with Brian here, or if you say he's delusional. And please be civil, guys. But Brian will read everything, so he will scoop around in the comments. I also go always on his channel and also I'm very active, especially when I'm a guest there. So thank you, Brian, for being on. Maybe for the end, you can just plug what you're working on, and then we can jump off.
The first thing I'd like to say is apologies for the spider and the bugs. This is, I'm kind of outside, you see. Otherwise, the dog barking would be more constant. What am I working on? I've got some big stuff coming up in the pipeline. I'm getting my Model Y. I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm getting lined up for that. So yeah, it's very exciting. I haven't decided what my first trip will be, but we'll get that sorted out soon enough. And, come on over, check out my channel if you haven't already. But if you've made it this far in the video, I suspect you might already be a fan.
Absolutely. I agree with that. So everybody, please follow My Tesla Weekend, Brian. Over here, I'm going to link his channel here. And this was the episode. We had our Cybertruck deep dive that I really long to have, because it's so near. We have a date now, and it's soon. It's in November. It's what was it? The 10th of November? 30th. Yeah. Exactly, 30th of November. And thank you, Brian, for being on. And we only have one last thing to say, and that's goodbye, everybody.
Wasn't this episode awesome? Let's accelerate the pace of innovation by subscribing to TeslaFix. It is my absolute favorite channel on the whole interwebs.